Ibinhlungu kakhulu. Ibinhlungu isikhathi sonke. Ngifika koMlengana. Ngenxa yokuvalwa kwama-industries. Ayekuphuphela kwemuli eziningi. Imathebeleland. Indawo elenotho emangalisiyayo. Kodwa intela aphethwe ngayo iZANU-PF ayitshengisi lokho. Ukudla akula. Isitshwala akula. Imali. Ama-salaries. Umsebenzini. Upresident welizwe.
Look at where we were before. By stability, really we mean the movement of prices in the shops, upwards in Zimbabwe dollar terms. So we've really improved on that.
The situation right now with me, your host, as usual, Dara Blessed Mhlanga. We're going to be discussing issues around our economy, issues around our currency, and the possible the mid-term budget that we are going to be expecting from government. Now, our emphasis and our look is it carrying with it the poor as it goes? We have had Finance Minister Tuli Ngube say that this budget his budget previously was a poor budget. But we have seen, in all earnest, in all things happening, that the poor have remained poorer. We have seen a decay in our health institutions, and we have seen that our teachers, our soldiers, they're earning just less than $100 per month. Is this being poor? Now, to help me discuss this, I'm joined in studio by our economist in Zimbabwe and university lecturer, Professor Mnganu, Gift Mnganu. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Big Dara. Thank you for having me.
And I'm also joined by my brother, economist, Persistence Kwanyanyan. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Blessing. Thank you for having me on the program.
For the first time I'm wearing a suit, I anticipated that economists will come in suit. But we are holding this program in partnership with the Citizen in Action Southern Africa and ICOD Zimbabwe. Now, I'll start with you, Nkoma Kwanye. Poor budget. What is it that you would probably be expecting if we have a mid-term budget that could make sure that the poor are carried in this budget and they get reprieve?
Thank you. I think if we reflect the journey we're traveling as an economy is the journey of reforms. In 2018, October 2018, the current government embarked on what I can call serious reforms that span up to 2030 under the Vision 2030. Now, reforms by their nature are painful. So we went through a reform period, initial 2-year period to deal with stability. That was a transitional stabilization program, which ended in 2020. And that transitional stabilization program entails a measure of rebalancing of mainly the fiscals. and living within means. So that was the major thrust of the transitional stabilization program. So as you do that, and this is a government that was spending outside the capacity with the over expenditure of above 10% of GDP, and is now having to live within means, and with the narrative of trying to achieve some measure of surplus as a country. So clearly from that, you can see that there will be some measure of squeezing the ordinary person. Post the transitional stabilization program, and which also coincided with some external shocks in the economy in form of drought and the 2 cyclones, as well as COVID-19. This sort of added to the pressure that the ordinary person had in the economy, and also the pressure that the economy was now bearing. So clearly, as we travel this journey and we try and get the economy back on course and reform the economy, there should be an element of carrying with you the ordinary person who would bear the biggest brand of such a reform. So the idea that the budget should be coached around the ordinary person is in order, and reflects the journey we're traveling as an economy, which journey is that of trying to deal with long-term challenges that we face as an economy. And in face of the global challenges that are also affecting our country, and that would impact negatively on the recovery prospects of the country, we expect some measure of protectionist, of some measure of social security, prioritization of social security, without necessarily losing the bigger picture of trying to get out of our economic challenges permanently.
I'll come to you, Professor Mwa. Your expectations, or the things that you look at, so that the poor are actually also part of this budget, and they're captured, you know.
So, look, the usual challenge of high taxes, I would want to see the Minister of Finance revisiting the taxes. You know, when we started the reforms, as Percy was saying, the thrust was to have austerity at the beginning. And I don't think it's fair for us to continue with austerity, because austerity is about high taxes and also tight budget framework. So at this stage, you'd want to see Minister of Finance removing some of the taxes, particularly the 2% tax. I think it is overstayed in face of the tight economic situation which we have, where disposable incomes are quite low. They are far below the consumer basket of above 100,000 RTGS, and I'm sure we are hearing figures of $20,000, $30,000, which our civil servants are netting. So you don't want, again, same people to be exposed to 4% tax on foreign currency, assuming I'm getting money through monetary transfers, and any transaction I'm doing, whether it's through money transfer, whether through Eco Cash, I am being charged again 4%. And when you look at it, the 4%, for example, when I'm sending money, I'm being charged 4% on $100. And when my mother is receiving the same money, she's being charged 4%. So the two of us, we are paying $8 for the same $100. So I would think that at this stage, we know government does not have money for safety nets, such as giving money to people, like what they do in advanced economies. Even in South Africa, they have over 15 million people on social transfer programs. But the only thing which I think is only fair is for government to look at the taxes. They'll still get it through VAT. Because if you don't tax me 4% and 2% on taxes, and I go and buy from the shops, you still get VAT. So I think there is a leeway of recovery for government. That's very critical. The second point is that I'm expecting the Minister of Finance to have a supplementary budget because the conditions through which he was doing the budget in 2021 for 2022 have changed. So I'm sure we'll go into detail about that, but basically I would want to see him addressing the salaries of the staff, of the workers. There is a serious wage compression to the extent that the level of people in extreme poverty in this country, since he was talking about the reforms, right? In 2018, people in extreme poverty were 29% of the total population, from Zimstad's figures. That is about 4.5 million people. In fact, around 4 million people. In 2020, and the figures have remained flat. We are now 49% of the population in extreme poverty. And this is as a result of the economic challenges and also the policy matrix where the taxes also comes in. So you don't want a situation in a country where is government, half of your population, 7.9 million people, are in extreme poverty, including workers. They are part of the extreme poverty basket. So for me, it's about that. But the last point I want to mention, I would want to see the Minister of Finance addressing the issues of currency issue, because the currency issue also has got an impact on the poverty levels. But if the money is losing value every day, it means that money is useless, and it can't help me to buy what I'm supposed to be buying, and I'll go into poverty. And what do we expect from him? We would want to hear government taking note of the excessive money supply coming from government funding, particularly on the government programs, as a menace. I'm a bit worried, Big Dara, when our president speaks at the public platforms. I don't hear in his speech a statement around excessive money from government as a challenge. I only hear one side where he speaks about business behavior, which I'm not saying businesses are angels, but I'm saying when one is addressing an issue, you would expect his advisors who write the speech should have a balanced approach on what is creating a challenge for this country. I would want to put it on a seesaw. You know, when you grew up, we used to play on a seesaw. The government burden on the economy is the heaviest. The business is actually in the sky because we pushed by the heavy champion, which is the economy, the government side, where I'm talking about how much money they are putting in construction, how much they are putting in agriculture. We are talking of close to 450 billion RTGS right now, according to the budget. Just last week, the Minister of Finance announced that he's going to be paying 50% of contractors in US dollars. I think that is the direction that he must take in the midterm review, where he increased the thresholds of payments to agricultural farmers in US dollars and to construction in US dollars to reduce the burden of money supply going to the economy, because that is what is troubling us as a nation.
Now, you spoke about government living within its means, and Professor Mganu speaks about the burden of government actually, spending beyond its means. How do we meet those? How do we converge on those two different statements?
Historically, our challenge revolved around the injudicious management of the fiscals, typified by a government that was living outside its means. This is what got us into hyperinflation, and this is what got us into the volatilities thereafter. That is after the period when dollarization worked perfectly. So this has been a challenge of the country. The debt levels that we currently experiencing as an economy could be attributable to that situation.
But our government still is amassing serious debts Actually, Finance Minister Mthuli is going to Parliament to seek condonation of lots of money right now, is it not?
So that condonation is not in respect of expenditures above revenues, but it is a condonation to do with over expenditure. That is, you are expending more than what was appropriated or budgeted for, and ostensibly so because of the high levels of inflation. So if you look, for example, in 2020, the average inflation rate, it picked up. You remember that's when inflation increased to 837%. So it is expected that because of the high levels of inflation, the performance of revenue is also going to exceed the target. And in line with that revenue performance, you expect a measure of adjustment on expenditures. And that is provided for by way of condonation within the Constitution itself. So this is the situation for 2019, and 2020. But the key issue remains that the inflation itself is not a good sign for the economy. Inflation and exchange rate depreciation are not good signs for the economy. So what you are seeing are occasioned by those two adversaries. So what that instructs you is we need to deal with the inflation, we need to deal with currency volatilities in a more permanent way. Now, we talked about budget balancing or rebalancing of the budget, which is essentially judicious management of the fiscals, where you don't overspend. But we had a measure of budget rebalancing from the time we embarked on reforms, that is 2019, 2020, and 2021. The narrative has always been surpluses. But like what the professor has pointed out, is that whilst the global picture or the bigger picture reflects some measure of living within means, but the management of the cash flow remains a concern, which concern needs to be addressed. So at government level, it's true that there has been some measure of lumpy payments that have destabilized the exchange rate. That has also resulted in the spiking of inflation. And those issues, those are some of the issues that I think are within our control to manage and deal with the volatilities that we currently facing as an economy. So because of that, the response of government has been to activate the Liquidity Management Committee, and we still to see the results of the Liquidity Management Committee, which is constituted by the Ministry of Finance and the Treasury, mainly to deal with the liquidity management of the country.
Yeah, but he spoke about the currency. I will come to you. He spoke about the currency, about finding value on the currency. Now, just if you look, just about 3 weeks ago, the price of a loaf of bread was around 300 Zimbabwean dollars, and in a week it went to 600, and in another week it's on 1,200. I mean, how do we talk about currency stability to ensure that people can actually spend and plan and save actually?
The currency stability is at the center of our challenges that needed to be dealt with immediately. The issues that need immediate attention could be the currency instability. Now, I would have thought that at a certain level of exchange rate, some measure of equilibrium would be restored to the effect of even restoring stability currently. But our biggest challenge currently seems to be in the operation of the auction system itself, that we had some backlog in the auction system. If that backlog had been expunged, I'm quite confident by now some measure of stability would have started to show in the economy. But there is a context to even the progress with regards to resolving the backlog issues, which is also tied to the structure of our economy itself. So whilst we can talk about these issues as they affect us in an immediate manner, the real issue is that our issues are long term. They've been there for a long time and they may not disappear anytime soon. Hence the need for the reforms that we currently are in as a country. But as we undertake these reforms, it is important that we respond to the immediate needs of the day. We don't take a straight-jacketed approach. Hence, even the approach to also look at the currency regime as a multiple currency regime, where, if need be, some measure of payments in US dollars should be considered. If that is what protects us from the volatilities that tend to hound us as an economy today, so let it be. It's always about the balance, to what level, because we should always bear in mind that the ultimate objective is to eventually effectively de-dollarize as an economy. But that journey should be a journey which carries with it some measure of considerations of the need of the day, so we don't lose the traction towards de-dollarization as an economy.
You can come in.
Thank you, Big Data. But I just want to build on that question and also try to comment on what Percy said. I think the issue of condonation is a worry. I mean, let's accept it as Zimbabweans. Truly, if you look at 2019, our budget was $8.1 billion. And the government spent outside the budget $6.8 billion without parliament oversight. Now, 2020, our expected revenue was supposed to be $58 billion, right? Mm-hmm. And the expenditure, $63 billion. We're supposed to have a deficit of $5 billion, right? And we are seeking condonation of excessive expenditure of 102 billion Zimbabwean dollars, which is almost 2 times our expected revenue. So, yes, I agree with the pace that clearly the revenue was not stationary, but we don't know how much was the revenue, because ideally the Minister of Finance was supposed to do a supplementary budget for him to show that the fundamentals of what have changed. I'm getting more revenue. I'm also getting more pressure on expenditure. Clearly, let's be very honest on that. I'm not taking out what he said. Technically, I agree with him, but I want to send a message to government to say, to instill confidence, because if you want to support our currency as well, it's confidence. These are things which takes away confidence, because when I'm watching as an economic agent, and the Minister of Finance is telling me that Zvakarongeka. Then after 1 year or so, I'm being told that there was this expenditure. It sent a very, very bad signal, which will be very difficult to deal with from the response of the economic agents. And at this stage, we cannot tell whether there was a surplus or there was a deficit, because we have not been favored publicly with those statistics. So we are still worried. Now, coming back to the issue of fostering stability in the currency, I think I want to add what Percy said. I think we are aligned. It's very right that we need to see clearly of the backlog. But I would want to add to over and above what he has said. Clearing the backlog alone in the auction system is not enough. We need a situation where the interbank system works. Currently, you can't walk into a bank and buy foreign currency. You can only go to the bank and sell foreign currency. So if we want to have a stable rate where the black market is closer to the official rate, you need to have the interbank as a real interbank market. One way which I think works is for central bank to give more prominence to bureau de change, to work under any proper formalized manner where anyone can walk into that bureau de change and that exchange rate is recognized as the official exchange rate. Because as long as people cannot walk into a bank and buy foreign currency, you continue to see thriving of the black market. And you continue to see runaway differences between the official rate and the black market rate. And that will continue to attack our currency. But finally, in terms of currency stability, the strength of the currency is reflected in the production capacity of a country. If we are productive, our currency will be strong. So what is it which is stopping us from being productive? Two key issues. The first one, distortions. We have serious distortions in this economy. If you look at the agricultural sector, for example, there are heavy subsidies going to the market. And you therefore see that our market now depends on freebies, our market is not disciplined, the players in the value chain, like in the agro-processing, have difficulties in contracting the same farmer who is being contracted by government for free. And then we have challenges in terms of production. So we need to have a market-led economy, and we create a conducive environment where, for example, for agriculture, the commodity exchange takes center stage of financing agriculture because they have warehouse receipts and also marketing of grains, right? The second issue, my last point on production, is to eliminate any form of corruption. We are losing $2.8 billion every year, 1.8 from illicit financial flow. We are losing about $1 billion on domestic corruption when you look at Auditor General report. Sometimes we have 3 billion. But I'm saying if this money is going to be made available for production, in 2 years we have enough money for retooling. We don't even need to go to IMF or World Bank. So we need to deal with things. So my last point to government. I would want to challenge government that at this stage we have NDS1. But I think we need a special paper which is addressing our economic trajectory. And I want to appeal to the President, A.D.M. Mnangagwa, when we were speaking at the Heroes, and was saying that we are going to put the tools. And in the realm of that speech, I would want to argue that the tools should come from the ecosystem of policy making, which include academia, business, civil society, government. We need to have, in a short period of time, a paper which speaks to diagnosing the problem. What is causing the rate to run away? What is causing the currency to weaken? What is causing inflation?
Are you saying we don't have things that actually speak to what is causing our problems at the moment?
We don't have. That's why you saw that on the 7th of May, Saturday evening, there were announcements by the President, which include suspending lending, which was reversed after a week. It means we were using wrong prescription to a sick patient called Zimbabwe. We don't have. Why would you put measures which you lift up? Some of the measures which are remaining is out of government. I'm sure they are shy to remove them out because you cannot sustain 4% tax on foreign currency if you want to formalize foreign currency. That should be removed. So at this stage, we don't have. Even if we might want to argue that those could be good points, I would want to call for a demand-driven policy where everyone in this country says, yes, let's go for it. And we sign a social contract that we are agreeing on these policy measures. At this stage, we have not had a forum where this ecosystem I've talked about have sat in one room and debated on these policies. I would want the government to treat the economy as a patient, which when you go to a medical doctor, they will not give you any prescription, maybe painkillers, until they are satisfied that they do full diagnostic and give you a prescription. It's a very simple approach which we respect medical doctors does. When you go to lawyers, they do the same. They diagnose your issue, they create precedents, they give you options, and they will tell you if you go to court on this matter, you lose. In this instance, you win. So, but when we come to economics, we were taught of a policy-making cycle, the same way. But our field has been hijacked by people who knows everything in economics when they don't know. And that's why we are getting to a point where announcements are made, and after a week you reverse. We should not get to that point. Yeah.
I mean, our finances are led by a whole professor, someone who has held big positions in international banking institutions. I mean, would our finance minister, Professor Mthuli, not have found out what the real problems are in Zimbabwe and put a blueprint to address this, so that, I mean, we can begin to carry the poor with us? Because in all this that's happening, the poor are the most hit, aren't they?
Yeah. So, like I indicated to you from the very beginning, the problems of Zimbabwe are long term. They are structural. So they cannot be resolved overnight, in a year or in some few years. The starting point would be to understand those challenges. Of course, there's need for consensus in terms of the understanding of the challenges, but I'll try and summarize those challenges. Over time as an economy, we went through a period of protracted deindustrialization. So deindustrialization means the decimation of the manufacturing sector as a proportion of GDP. So the fact we don't have a thriving industry is a concern. We went through deindustrialization at a point where the global economy was climbing into a manufacturing sector or manufacturing sector led economies. So that's our biggest challenge. Now, who is driving the economy? Our economy is being driven by resource-based industries. I can give you an example of the exports that we generate as an economy. I think last year about 6 billion or so, and more than 85% of those contributed by 5 commodities: gold, platinum, chrome, diamonds, and tobacco. That is the structure of our economy. If you look into the banking system, you'll find out that even the deposits, both the US dollars and Zimbabwean dollars, are concentrated within a small range, a small number of corporates and individuals. I think at one point the Reserve Bank published that about 50 to 100 corporates were contributing a significant amount of the deposits in the banking system. And even within the banks, those deposits are concentrated in 1, 2, or 3 banks. So we've got a serious concentration issue in this economy. So that's why everything we're trying to do doesn't seem to work. I'll go back to the issue of the exchange rate, given the structure of this economy. If we say today exchange rate is going to be purely market driven and government off its hands on exchange rate, what we see is there is one customer that probably has total deposits of say 10% of the total deposits in the country. So this customer will simply go and bid at an exchange rate that no one would compete with. So this gives some measure of inefficiency in the establishment of the exchange rate itself. That's why even the interbank market itself, where trading of exchange rate between parties in a free environment without interventions become a bit tricky in this economy. Just take, for example, one company that is Zimplus, that is on the generation of foreign currency itself, generated a revenue of 1.4 billion as one company out of the 6 or so billion that are generated in terms of export in this country. So if that company then chooses not to liquidate its foreign currency, maybe it relies on bank borrowings, etc., just chooses to do so, it means that everyone, especially the necessities, will suffer the most. So I'm just giving you a glimpse of the structure.
Necessities already suffering a lot even in this system. I mean, I've seen that even Pararinya to a group of hospitals is failing to do surgeries right now because they have massive shortages. I've also seen that, you know, if you go on social media right now, you see people volunteering what they have got. I mean, when we grew up, we wouldn't know the next person how much they were earning, you know. But right now, people are volunteering on social media to say, look, I'm a police officer and I've been working for the whole month and I've just got in my account 20,000.
So the explanation that I'm going to give you would point to the fact that the challenges of Zimbabwe can be managed. They are essentially around how these things should be managed. So
those who are not managing it are doing it deliberately.
You're talking about the deterioration in the service delivery within the public system, and I'm just talking about the foreign currency of the economy and the functionality of markets to avail foreign currency to those that would need foreign currency. Just as an example, in terms of the availability of resources in the country, the government is preferred to use a surrender system, in that for every dollar that you export, a portion of it comes to the central bank for the rest of the economy to access it. This is driven from the structure of the economy, in that there are few who earns foreign currency, but the rest of us don't earn foreign currency, but would need it for necessities and other essentials of life. So this is the system that is currently in operation in the country. And the Exchange Control Act has always been there, even including during Smith's period. And that owes to the structure of the economy. Now, in this economy, if government is collecting or has been collecting 40% of foreign currency in terms of surrender portion, it has been buying or accessing that 40%. If we did 6 billion, for example, in exports, it gives you about $2.4 billion. In the auction system, which is a market through which we access foreign currency to deal with the issues of service delivery that you're talking about, has been requiring about $2 billion from an allocation of an average of 40 million on 50 weeks. It's about 2 billion. So that global picture would show you that in terms of the availability of resources and where government can dip into for availing to the market, they would be those resources. So what we just need now is the management of those resources and the improved efficiency of the market through which the foreign currency is availed.
Before I cross over to Professor Mga, but you said the Zimbabwe problem is not short-term, it's a long-term problem. And from my understanding, we've been having this problem before 2009 when we dollarized.
Yes.
So we've been long-term, it's over a decade.
Yes.
So we are in a long-term problem, suffering long-term.
So it's quite interesting. Mm-hmm. So what we need to deal with a long-term challenge such as ours is to commit to reforms. Let me just give you an example. in the late 70s, China itself, its GDP per capita was actually comparable to that of Zimbabwe. But as we hit 2000, the new millennium, it was the talk of the new millennium. And as we get into the 2005, thereabouts, before the global financial crisis, etc., it was the second largest economy in the world. The reason is they committed to reforms, to serious reforms. No country will get out of its permanent structural challenges without committing to reforms. The IMF gives us an indication of the time frame that is required to deal with the structural issues of a country. That it takes not more less than 10 years for that country to get out of its structural challenges. So when we embarked on the reforms that are within the Vision 2030, this is the kind of characterization in terms of the economy that we expecting as an economy to be dealing with. Now, as I talk about reforms, I've just given you why it is difficult for this economy to just run on its own in the financial markets, in the current markets, because of the structure of the economy in that it is concentrated in the hands of a few. Now, how do we deal with that? Diversify the economy. How do we deal with that? Climb up the value chain. But which is the logic that we see coming out of government? I would want to say that because in terms of logic and what needs to be done, there seems to be some measure of soundness in the logic of the government policy. But I'm so concerned about the implementation and the realization and traveling the trajectory of that logic. That is where the challenge could be. So we need to diversify the economy. How do we diversify the economy? All government facets should work towards diversifying the economy and increasing the manufacturing sector as a share of the GDP. How do we do that? Look at even the auction system. The maximum accessible amount is $500,000. What does that mean? It means that those that have got the muscle, because of the concentration of the economy, are limited to the same level to those that are still trying to climb the value chain. So we're supporting those on the lower level of the value chain to the extent of accessibility of foreign currency. To that extent, the reasoning would be a small number of companies that would seek to climb the value chain into the manufacturing space would be assisted to do so. And essentially, we are diversifying our economy. So it rises on the shoulders, broad shoulders of a prosperous manufacturing sector. That's only when the problems of the country are solved permanently.
Do you agree, Professor?
Look, I think there are issues which I want to correct from Percy. The first question which you asked him about Minister of Finance being a full professor and well-decorated Zimbabwean, is my role model, by the way. I like his CV and I envy his track record, what he has done. So I have nothing against him. But when you look at how he has performed, let's give numbers. From 2018, when he became Minister of Finance, let me use numbers. First, the inflation, annual inflation was 5% per year. And he took inflation from 5% to almost 1,000%. 1,000% after suspending calculation of inflation in 2019. Remember, in July 2019, the Minister of Finance said, "Well, Marcus, let's stop here until February 2020." And we went back again to start estimating inflation. July 2020, we were 837.5% inflation. That to give you the number. Now, in terms of poverty level was 29%, extreme poverty in 2018, Now we talk of 49%. So if he was a goalkeeper, he's letting goals in. I don't think he has applied his CFV to the fullest to say things are working. There has been a number of policy missteps, flip-flopping, many statutory instruments. So it's only fair for us to review how he has worked. I think amongst all the ministers of finance since independence, I rate him the lowest. And I think at this stage, I would want to advise government to engage more within the ecosystem of policy making than to rely on advice from Minister of Finance. I think we'll be creating more havoc for this country. He is a professor of economics, and our minister should know that you cannot finance a road with cash. That's where our challenge is. So I agree, it's granted that we have structural challenges. But there are certain things which we are doing which I can call atrocities. And if the atrocities which has happened now, which worries me, short term, because you are right on long term. Let me add the short term. When we went into unity government, we were saying if we get at least $1 billion, we are good. And at that point, there was the discussion between South African Central Bank, if you recall, and Zimbabwe Central Bank to borrow $1 billion to make sure we fly as a country. And guess what happened? Last year, we got how much money from IMF, SDR funds? Almost $1 billion. And how are we using the money? Look at the Minister of Finance report. They are putting $80 million of that money into peri-urban agriculture, paying the money which we were waiting for all these years, which we could put into industry. I actually had a call with the Minister of Finance in one platform where he was speaking about the SDR funds. And I said, Honorable Minister, and I said, put this money into Industrial Development Corporation. Turn the Industrial Development Corporation into Development Finance Institution. And this money now is used as funds for retooling, for value chain development, economic transformation, retooling. The other part of money, put it into AFC, Agricultural Finance Corporation, to provide, again, development finance to agriculture, to deal with the issues of what? Agriculture. This is a classic example to deal with short-term issues. But his response was very clear. He admitted that they already have a cabinet position on Industrial Development Corporation to be a DFI. I think in 2019, according to him. But the implementation, he was then stammering on what is he doing with that. But he insisted he's going to use this money through the budget. How can you use the money which you got as a kind of a grant capital to set up a development finance institution which can give you trade finance, loans for a revolving fund, and it becomes a bank. So if you look at the Industrial Development Corporation of South Africa, the same name, but it's a development finance institution. So it will address what Pesi is talking about. So I've talked about $80 million which has been put into peri-urban agriculture. If you want to support peri-urban agriculture, that's why you waste your RTGS. If you want to even cause inflation, it's fair and fine. But you can't take hard currency to give peri-urban. Where are we farming, by the way, which requires $80 million? And when you look at the reports from Minister of Finance, he put $144 million again from IMF SDR funds, fully drawn, according to him, into road rehabilitation and Mbudzi roundabout. Clearly, yes, Mbudzi roundabout is a good thing. But where is our agents? Do we have a challenge of Mbudzi roundabout in this country, or we have a challenge of industrial issues, production? So, and last year, 2021, according to the reports from the Minister of Finance, do you know how much money we spent in importing maize? $100 million. 2020, with the drought, according to reports again, we spent $108 million. But 2021, we had a surplus, we received 2.7 million tons according to Minister of Agriculture. But we are spending, according to Minister of Finance reports, $100 million, US dollars. The question is, why are we importing $100 million worth of maize, almost similar to 2021, when we have surplus? And where is the maize? because the maize which we produced in the country is self-sufficient and takas as matura. So where is the maize going to? So I'm talking about issues which worries me as a citizen to say, yes, we admit we have long-term challenges, but in the short term, are we doing things right? What is under our control? So these things worries me, and I also hope Parliament should be worried about the same and be able to call the Minister of Finance and say, can you explain to us these issues which I'm talking about? Now, my last comment is that I still think that in as much as we admit that our challenges are long-term, but we need a serious debate as a country, serious debate on how we are going to come up with a financing model on infrastructure which is self-sustaining, which is not causing inflation. I think we need a solution on that issue, because that one is a short term to me, because as long as we are pumping money, because I'm seeing now Minister of Finance becoming the new central bank in court. The central bank, I have no issues with them. When you look at their numbers, I have no issues. But the money which is coming from Minister of Finance is worrying. We need to have a serious debate on how we're going to be financing agriculture in a sustainable manner. Those things are not long term, because every day, right now we're talking about the cotton. Its season is opened. Wait and see how the rate is going to be having. To be running away, because as soon as the farmer is paid that money in RTGS, immediately the farmer is going to buy foreign currency. So expect the rate to run away like they are, is it Olympics, right? So we need to have that debate. Then the last thing, our tax regime, again, person, knocking down the 4% tax on foreign currency is not long term. It has an impact on deposits, the domestic export. Because you cannot have a situation where you charge 4% for transacting foreign currency. And I am holding foreign currency with me, and I'm a retailer, or I'm a manufacturer, or I'm gift mgano. Do you think I'll just go and deposit that money in the bank and wait to be charged 4% for transferring to another account? I need to be taking I will be taking marijuana. You see? So I will not do that. I will keep that money. So we are starving now the formalization of foreign currency. So those are things which you need to say, let's separate what is long term, let's deal with what is short term, and let us also, issue of confidence building is very critical. It can be short term. Well, how can it be short term for a start? The moment you go into a round discussion and you agree together, you begin to put a seed of confidence. But if the policy is coming from government without extensive consultation, and you create a war like the last pronouncement, which were very recent, where people were just shocked by weekend pronouncement, already you continue to drive the confidence levels. But when you begin now to walk the talk, when you join these dots together, you agree on what needs to be done, you are building confidence slowly again. So we have spent 24 years in this journey, from 1998 to 2022. And we can't continue to say these are long term. Well, otherwise, this generation will be wiped out when we are talking about long term solutions.
Now, also, Percy spoke about the issue of value chain, and saying that we also need to protect the smaller players, because if the bigger players are left to do what they want, they can run away with the game, with the ball. But the complaint, especially from the members of the public, is that whilst these measures are being put in place ostensibly to protect and ostensibly to make sure that critical areas get funding, it's not what is happening. It's pockets of few elites that are being funded or oiled by these measures. What is your view on that complaint?
Yeah, it's a valid complaint. When you listen to CZI, I can only refer to CZI because they are representing business. Remember, there was a paper they wrote which became a bone of contention between central bank and CZI when the governor replied. In that paper, they were saying that the auction system must be disbanded. I think that's quite an authoritative paper to refer to before we say hearsay, because they're coming from industry. But when I also talk to business, interacting with various senior executives in business, there are some who have gone for 6 months on the waiting list, and it's worrying. But also to say that the issue of value chain enhancement, I think when you look at central bank as allocation mechanism, it's only fair to acknowledge whether they are doing well. I think 75%, you can correct me, of the foreign currency goes to manufacturing. That shows what central bank is doing. So they are doing very well in terms of putting foreign currency to industry, notwithstanding some complaints of isolated cases. But now, where is the game? The game is with the Ministry of Finance. Again, I'm back to them. Why? Because when you look at the national budget of 2021 as an example, which is very close, not 2022, 2021. If you look at the utilization of funds by line ministries by June, Ministry of Industry and Commerce, which has got the Industrial Development Corporation under its armpit, which should be getting money for funding, for giving grants or loans to industry for retooling and value chain enhancement. By June 2021, it received 9% of the budget. Are you with me? 9%. 09, not 90. So, why? Because there was no release of funds which were supposed to be meant for IDC. By 30 September 2021, the same ministry had received 31% of the release. Yet, ideally, at that point, that's the third quarter of the year, it should have received what? 75%. So how do you enhance value chain? So this is the point of implementation, to say, when we have our budget, we should go in line with our budget. What I'm saying here is not prophetic big data. These are the facts from how the Ministry of Finance is reporting the disbursement of the funds. But when you look at it now, who was getting the lion's share by 30 September 2021? It's the Ministry of Defense, it's the President's Office, it's the Ministry of Finance. I think they overspent by 38%. They were the 38% utilized the Ministry of Finance. It's the Ministry of Agriculture, 169% utilization. And when you look at those areas, are we disbursing funds to support the value chain, to move up the value chain, economic transformation? The answer is no. You see a sense of political distribution. Because when you see Ministry of Defense being given more money, OPC being given more money, Ministry of Finance, they are the ones dispersing, so they are also riding on that. Ministry of Agriculture getting more money, construction, transport getting more money. Social ministries, the health, the education, the industry and commerce, they are getting nothing. We go to birth certificate, you can't get it. You go to passport, you can't get it. You go to ID, you can't get it. I was doing some surveys in the communities, and I came across in a public hospital, doing research to people who are getting services. And one woman was being asked to buy the consumables which are supposed to be used when you are giving birth. So before you register, you have to make sure you come and show the nurse sister in charge and say, I now have everything.
I'm ready.
I'm ready. And this lady was crying to say, where do I get the money? Something which must be provided by the hospital. I'm talking about the real issues on the ground. You go to, so I had to pay for that lady. Out of sympathy to say, this can't be life. So we are talking about the real issues on the ground here. We are talking about the hingri-kingri, where people they drink a lot of wine and they begin now to talk about good language. You go to education. There's no education to talk about in this country. If you don't give the teacher some money or this, what do you call, extra lessons, you are guaranteed that no education is taking place. And the people have already forgotten about this. It sounds like things are normal. So we have work to do. We need to have a roundtable discussion about this economy. Clearly, we cannot communicate as if other stakeholders are in America, others are in Zimbabwe. Government is in town, business is in town, civil society is in town, academics are in town, media is in town. Let's go into one room and look ourselves, debate about this economy, proffer solutions. This whole issue of trying to sugarcoat and try to put some lipstick on a frog to make it a beauty queen doesn't work.
persistent. What do you think could be, our way forward as a nation to you proffer amazing solutions and the issues that need to be done to deal with this long-term problem, but it doesn't look like we have anything on the ground solidly as you talk about to achieve those things that you're talking about. So what do we do?
So the whole idea is to get a shared view of the challenges we're facing as a country.
We're still discussing the economy, where we are talking about how the economy, how the policies of this government, the government of President Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, can actually carry the poor with them. Now, as you have heard from Professor Mgunu, that 49% of Zimbabweans are living in extreme poverty at the present moment. But our government is talking about a middle-income economy by 2030, and we are already in 2022. We just little shy 7 years. Is that possible? Can that be done? Is it even possible to talk about that when you have 49% of your people, including those who are employed, living in extreme poverty? But I was talking to you before our enforced break by a massive power cut that have hit the studio, but I was talking to you about what is it that can be done so that we can achieve these things, But I also want us to look at the political economy, because we've been concentrating majorly on the economy as in isolation, but we're also going to an election. A lot of populistic decisions are going to be made that will probably attack or affect our performance. Persistence.
So I think the solution centers around a common vision and the commonality of purpose. There is something called one government model. The government itself must work towards common goal. And we don't expect a compartmentalized approach to issues. We want one vision, and we want to work towards one common vision. Now, if we identify the need to diversify the economy, in whatever we do as an economy, that should reflect, be it Ministry of Industry, be it the Reserve Bank, be it developmental financial institutions, that must reflect. So we still to get there, in my view, and we need to work towards getting there. It's one thing discussing here and getting on the ground to do exactly what we have discussed, or for what we are doing to reflect the spirit of the discussions. So that is quite important. So the idea of agreeing on the kind of the challenge we face as an economy is very important. We agree and we work towards dealing with that challenge. Now, Prof highlighted a number of challenges that we're facing as an economy, which I agree with, that we're not sitting in a good space as a country. There are other positives that are happening elsewhere in the economy, but I think we need to balance those positives so we don't leave behind the generality of the population. If you're talking about a road from Beitbridge to Masvingo and Harare, yes, it's fine, but our work towards that road must not be at the expense of other key pressing issues of the economy. So I hear from Prof that we seem to be lagging behind seriously in terms of the public service provision, in terms of education, in terms of health. And we now want to see some measure of focus on those areas. Even the SDRs is talking about, I think in their true sense, the original thinking around the SDRs by IMF was to deal with these social issues as they are presented in a COVID-19 setup. So clearly, like the theme of the discussion, we need to look at the poor and try to raise the poor from where they are currently.
Now, I think we've just run out of time, but I want to allow you just to carry on from your thought to give us your concluding remarks. We're focusing on what you would term the ingredients of a pro-poor budget and what we can expect, from I know you're not the finance minister, but if we were to give you the blue book, what would you scribble in it?
So we should agree that we need to go through a reform period. But as we go through a reform process, we cannot leave behind the rest of the economy. The best the government can deliver to the ordinary person is a stable environment currently. That's what we want. So all focus should be on promotion of stability as it is currently. So we can then talk about growth, development on a stable environment. That's why they talk about growth with stability.
I mean, I'll come to you for your concluding remarks. Seeing that we are probably going to a $1 trillion budget in Zimbabwe, and that really, salary increases in RTGS or in the local currency have not really helped, because the moment a salary increase has been recorded, prices just basically jump through. Well, what is it that we can do in conclusion?
Yeah, but before I conclude, I think that's a good observation which you made, Big Data. $1 trillion budget. In 2018, $8.1 billion budget. How many years? So it tells you how we are failing as a country from a Ministry of Finance perspective. You can't just move like that. If the world was growing like that, it would be phenomenal. But now coming back to my conclusion. The issue of salary which you are raising, very critical. I would want to persuade the Minister of Finance, something which I said to him when we were having a pre-budget consultations in Victoria Falls, that go for US dollar budget. And my argument last year, what we are talking about today, that it will be very difficult to sustain Zimbabwean dollar budget in view of the current budget architecture, which is characterized by heavy-handedness in terms of short-term finance in funding long-term infrastructure, and they have subsidies on agriculture. So Zimbabwe, what it needs now, I want to build on what Percy just said. We need to have a clear reform strategy on going back for de-dollarization. But I think we need to start by repenting first. How do we repent? We go for dollarization, and with one currency, we have one exchange rate, which is 1:1. Then we begin to set, say, 5 to 10 year roadmap, which will address issues of production, issues of current account surplus, trade balance, trade surplus, reserves of foreign currency, which should take us to 6 months reserve of foreign currency for import cover, work on fiscal consolidation, dealing with our debt, But the central theme should be on production. Because sometimes you can't balance all of this. You can't have debt management overnight. But if you are a very productive country, you're okay. That's why you say America has got a higher debt levels. But they don't feel it because they're very productive. So I don't think it would be fair for Minister of Finance in the midterm review to come and talk about, first and foremost, you are very right to say it's a $1 trillion budget. Because I can tell you without any shadow of doubt, he is forced by the market to present a new supplementary budget, which can be 3 times what he has today, if he wants to be very honest, and if he wants to avoid the condonation in the future. Now, but the moment you do it again, there's a problem. Because you are increasing outlay of money, which will cause again the rate to run away. So the only way to address this issue is to go back to US dollar and have a quick strategy to go back to Zimbabwean dollar along the way. But my last comment, I think it would be unfair if I don't comment about the geopolitical scenario in Russia, Ukraine. If you look at the current policy position today, you get more of internal solutions to say, we need to deal with the currency issue, we need to deal with inflation, but you don't get a clarity from government to say, how are they dealing with fertilizers, food, fuel, and other multiply effects around the Ukraine crisis. For example, in fuel, which is very easy, I'm arguing that government should reconsider reducing the duty on fuel from 30% to levels which they see is comfortable with. It will help the public and business to mitigate the cost. Remove the Zinara levy. The Zinara levy has been there before toll gates. So now we have toll gates. So why are we still maintaining double taxation? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it should be 12%. 12 cents, 12%, right? So that will go a long way in cutting the costs. The strategic reserve, I think government in a short term could use their SDR funds, could use their reserve. They're saying they have $1 billion in the account. And remove the percentage on the strategic reserves. The fuel can go down because the fuel is creating a menace. Clearly, week in, week out, we cannot afford to continue to come across new price adjustment of fuel and expect inflation to remain the same. But my last comment is that after having said this, I still want to appeal to Minister of Finance to be more open to ideas and divergence of ideas. Because, you know, person knows we used to go to Parliament for the last 4 years or so, year in, year out, talk about the economy, make a presentation to Parliament for consideration in the budget. Everything which I have said have come to pass. So even if you want to ignore, what are you ignoring? I think it's only fair that we sit down on a round table, we discuss. There's always a provision in government to sign Official Secret Act to make sure that whatever we are discussing stays there. So that when he comes out with his budget or his presentation, we will not be able to disagree with him because we would have agreed in the consultations. Our job will be then to support and say, this is what we are supposed to be doing as a country. But if we continue to exercise supremacy in terms of knowledge, the economy is more superior. I rest my case.
Thank you very much to my esteemed panelists, economists in Zimbabwe, operating in different fields, for sharing your views with me here on the situation right now. And, you know, it is every person's wish to have a comfortable life. And generally, government policy is what guides that. It is what guides that. When I work even in the private sector, I am able to send my children to a good school. I'm able to budget and save. Because a country that does not have savings has no way of developing. You know, because it's those savings that are done by ordinary people that are extended to business, to companies for that production piece that you're talking about. And if I don't have a saving as an individual, if I cannot save at the least, you know, $1,000 worth in a savings account, where do banks get that money to lend and then ensure that we have development in the country? So we look to the government to provide that policy framework to allow the people of Zimbabwe to at least enjoy a better life for themselves, their children, and their children's children. Now, this was the situation right now in partnership with Citizen in Action of Southern Africa. We thank you very much for listening in and for joining us here on Heart and Soul TV and radio. And thank you for choosing us as your station of choice. Until next time, ciao.